we think a small group of people got over to Australia. And these are the people we call the Aboriginal people. Now, soon after that time, about 50,000 years, climate change again, and nearly all the humans that were in the travel down to that area got wiped out. So there was a time in the world where there was only two places where humans lived. Back in Africa still, and in Australia. We call them the Aboriginal people. Aborigine is just a Latin word meaning original, native people.
So they were like Indian?
Yeah, it's just the original inhabitants. So now the Aborigine people were here then for 50-odd thousand years by themselves because nobody else came. And this has had a remarkable effect. Meanwhile, back in the rest of the world, around 10,000 years ago, climate change came again, the earth went dry. Instead of wandering around, the people had to come into the rivers and survive around the rivers. Classically, the rivers we're talking about are the Nile, the Indus, the Euphrates, the Tigris, the Yangtze, these major rivers. And when they did that, they couldn't wander off to get game because that's desert now. So they stayed here and they started growing crops. And once they started growing crops, planting seed, you have to wait around for the harvest. And if you're waiting around for the harvest, you're not wandering, and so you can build a house and you can gather together. And that's what we call civilization. That was the start of civilization. Now, none of that happened in Australia. None of it. Australia is a harsh country. It's a very hard country. It's the driest country on Earth, except oddly for Antarctica, which has lots of ice but no water.
So it's so dry. Does it rain that much here?
Well, part of it is so big. I mean, Australia is, think of the United States, we're as big as the United States, and your centre land of the United States, if you go into the prairie lands and so on, they're dry too, because they don't get the water coming in from the outside. Our coastal area, where most people live along this east coast, is quite nice. You know, we get enough water, but you get over the mountains and you're getting into dry territory. You're going up to Alice Springs, up to Ayers Rock, and you'll understand.
What about rainfall?
Rainfall, well, as you get further north, because north to us is going to the sun, not south, yeah, we've got lots of rainforest, but only on the coastal strip. Once you get over those mountains, you're into dry country again. Because the seawaters come in and they rise up to get over the mountains, they lose temperature, can't hold the water in this cloud, drop it on the mountain, and then it's dry from there on. So the Aborigines got here, but nobody else came. Now, because it's a harsh land, you can't have a lot of people together because there's just no food. So the biggest group that you would ever see of Aborigines was really just a family group. 20, 30 people, might get to 50, but rare. 20, 30 is a common group because that size group can move from here a couple of miles down the road and find some fruits and nuts and stuff to eat. 30 people will strip out an area pretty fast on food. A couple of days, they're moving again. Right? Now the effect of that was they owned nothing. Because if you're moving every couple of days, you can't quite do it with a trailer. When you think of it, you know, you're coming here for 2 weeks and we've got a trailer full of stuff there. But they were moving every day. You just can't carry stuff. So classically, a male would have maybe 2, maybe 3 spears. These spears are made of wood. Occasionally they might have a stone on the end, but nothing more. We're talking about Stone Age people, no science at all, and their sharpened stick is about the limit of their science. No cooking utensils, no pots, nothing like that. If you want to cook a kangaroo, you kill the kangaroo first, that's nice. You throw it on the fire, the skin burns off. You pull it out of the fire and you scrape off the cooked bit of meat. You throw the kangaroo back in to cook a bit more. You scrape that bit of cooked off and you throw it back in again. No knives, no forks, no plates, no nothing, right? Nothing, no utensils. Frying pan, Frying pan, yep, you got that. You get a flat rock, you build a big fire on the rock, you sweep all the ashes off, and you throw stuff onto the hot rock. That's your frying pan, okay? Really, I can't emphasise, really very, very basic. Okay, for women, if the women wanted a makeover in their kitchen, they got a brand new digging stick, because that's all they carried. One stick made of hardwood timber, usually with a bit of a knobby thing at one end, and the other end sharpened. The sharp end you dug up yams and worms and witchetty grubs and things like that, and the solid end you use for banging on lizards' heads and snake heads to kill little animal things. Division of labour was absolute, and even today, I sometimes help Andy out with some of his guiding stuff, and if you go somewhere and we're talking about Aboriginal people, if we've got a male Aboriginal guide, when we get back in the bus, I will say, okay, you've heard half the story of the Aboriginal world, now I'll tell you the women's side. And if it's a woman, I'll say, now I'll tell you the men's side, because women cannot talk about men's things. Fundamental cultural thing. Can't do it. And women and men can't talk about women's things. That's women's stuff.
And they can't talk about deceased people, right?
Can't talk about, well, that's true too. They don't mention the name of deceased people. Now, when we talk about they with the Aborigines, we've got a problem immediately, because we're talking about a country as big as America, but with only about 300,000 people in it at most. The population took 60,000 years to grow to 300,000, which is very low population growth. In 60,000 years, 300,000. So that meant they were very spread, and so they were really quite different. Hundreds of languages, couldn't speak to each other. Customs and things were very different, although there are some common threads that you can pick, but they're not universal. You can always find an Aboriginal tribe who would speak about the dead, but most didn't. So you've got to think of that way with the Aboriginal people.
Final minute.
Huh?
Final minute.
Oh, I'm on my last minute. Good. Anyway, then the white. Well, then the white man came. Okay, in 1770, Captain Cook found this area. England, yeah, all English now. All our history's English now. And in 1788, the first fleet came with a whole lot of criminals and convicts. We were a prison. And I've got to say this bit before I get out. And they starved. It was like the history of America in Jamestown. They almost starved, almost wiped out. But they finally got one family to come out, and that family is the direct descendant of me. Andy can tell you. From my mother.
I'll finish the story.
So, the first white person born in Australia was my ancestor.
Really?
Yeah, true story.
So you haven't got an Australian guide, you've got the Australian guide.
Are we going to see that?
Good luck, I'll see you around.
We're going to see that before we leave?
Yeah. Hey, Dad.
Listen, cameraman, you didn't ask us to sign no disclaimer, you know.